Elvis and the street musician Elvis Presley was walking down Beale Street when he heard his own voice coming from a guitar case on the sidewalk, but it wasn't a recording. It was a 16-year-old kid who had no idea his life was about to change forever. It was a humid Tuesday afternoon in Memphis, July 1976. Elvis had been feeling restless at Graceland and decided to take one of his rare unannounced walks through downtown. He wore sunglasses and a simple black shirt, hoping to blend in with the crowd. As he turned onto Beale Street, the heart of Memphis's music scene, something stopped him in his tracks. Someone was singing one of his songs with a voice so pure and heartfelt that it sent chills down his spine. The voice belonged to a thin teenager sitting cross-legged on the sidewalk, his back against a brick wall. The boy had shoulder-length dark hair and clothes that were clearly too big for his small frame. His guitar was old and battered, covered in scratches that told stories of countless hours of practice, but when the kid sang, none of that mattered. His voice carried the same soulful quality that had made Elvis famous, but there was something different about it, a raw pain that spoke of real hardship. The boy's name was Michael Chen, though nobody on the streets knew his real name. Everyone just called him Guitar Mike. He'd been living on the streets of Memphis for 8 months, ever since he'd aged out of the foster care system on his 16th birthday with nowhere to go. Music was all Michael had left. His foster parents had given him the guitar 3 years earlier, hoping it would keep him out of trouble. They never imagined it would become his lifeline when he had nothing else. Every day, Michael would sit on the same corner of Beale Street, playing for whatever change people would drop in his guitar case. On a good day, he might make enough for a sandwich and a bottle of water. On bad days, he went hungry, but he never stopped playing. Elvis stood about 20 feet away, hidden behind a small crowd of tourists who had gathered to listen. As Michael finished one song and began strumming the opening chords of another, Elvis felt something stir in his chest. This wasn't just some kid playing cover songs for money. This was someone who understood the soul of the music, who felt every word he was singing. Elvis pulled out his wallet and walked closer. The small crowd parted respectfully as they recognized something familiar about the man in sunglasses, though none of them immediately realized who he was. Elvis dropped a $100 bill into the guitar case. Michael's eyes opened when he saw the money. $100 was more than he usually made in 2 weeks. He looked up to thank whoever had been so generous, and his fingers froze on the guitar strings. Even with the sunglasses, there was no mistaking that face, the perfectly styled hair, the distinctive jawline, the slight smile that had graced 1,000 magazine covers. "Keep playing, son," Elvis said quietly. "You've got something special there." Michael's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his guitar. "You're just a guy who appreciates good music," Elvis replied, crouching down to Michael's level. "What's your name?" "Michael," the boy whispered, still in shock. "Michael Chen. I can't believe this is real." Elvis looked around at the small crowd that had gathered, then back at Michael. "You hungry, Michael?" The boy nodded, not trusting his voice. "Come on then. Let's get you something to eat and you can tell me your story." Elvis helped Michael pack up his guitar and led him to a small diner just off Beale Street. Over burgers and milkshakes, Michael told Elvis his story, the foster homes, the feeling of never belonging anywhere, the music that kept him going when everything else fell apart. "Your song saved my life," Michael said quietly. "When I was in my darkest moments, I'd play your music and remember that someone somewhere understood what it felt like to hurt." Elvis listened without interrupting, seeing himself in this young man's pain. He remembered his own childhood, the poverty, the feeling of being different, the music that had been his escape. "You know what I hear when you sing?" Elvis asked. "I hear someone who's lived the blues." "You can't fake that, Michael. You can't learn it from a book or a teacher. You've got to live it." What Elvis said next shocked Michael to his core. "I'm going into the studio next week to record some new material. How would you like to come with me? Not as backup or anything like that. I want to hear what you sound like with proper equipment and musicians who know what they're doing." Michael stared at Elvis, certain he was hallucinating. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." "But I've got one condition." Michael's heart sank. There was always a catch. "You've got to promise me you'll get off the streets. I know a place where you can stay. Good people who will take care of you while we figure out what's next for your music." 3 days later, Michael found himself in a recording studio, the same place where Elvis had recorded his first hits. He was clean, wearing new clothes that actually fit, and holding a guitar that cost more than he'd ever seen in his life. The session musicians were skeptical at first, but when Michael started singing, the room went silent. His voice, backed by professional musicians and recorded with studio-quality equipment, was nothing short of magical. Elvis stood in the control room watching through the glass as Michael sang with a pain and authenticity that gave him goosebumps. "That boy's got it," said the producer. "Whatever it is, he's got it in spades." During a break in recording, Michael mentioned something that caught Elvis's attention. "You know, Mr. Presley, I've been writing some songs too. Nothing fancy, just things that come to me when I'm playing on the street." "Let me hear one," Elvis said. Michael picked up his guitar and played a song he'd written called Memphis Rain. It was about loneliness, about watching the world go by from a street corner, about finding hope in the smallest kindnesses. When he finished, the studio was dead quiet. "Michael," Elvis said slowly, "that's not just a song, that's a hit." Elvis made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He decided to record Memphis Rain as a duet with Michael. The song captured something neither of them could have achieved alone. Elvis's legendary voice blended with Michael's raw emotion, creating something entirely new and powerful. When they finished recording, Elvis turned to Michael with a serious expression. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully. How would you feel about me helping you get a recording contract? Not as Elvis Presley's protege, but as Michael Chen, the artist." Michael looked at Elvis with tears in his eyes. 6 months ago, he'd been sleeping in doorways, wondering if he'd ever have a real chance at life. Now the king of rock and roll was offering him a future he'd never dared to dream of. "Why are you doing this for me?" Michael asked. Elvis was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with a sincerity that surprised everyone in the room. "Because somebody did it for me once. A man named Sam Phillips took a chance on a poor kid from Tupelo who had a voice and a dream, and because I heard something in your voice that reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place." The story of Elvis and Michael reminds us that talent doesn't always come with a spotlight and a stage. Sometimes it's sitting on a street corner hoping someone will listen. Elvis could have walked past that day, he could have enjoyed the performance and moved on. Instead, he chose to stop, to listen, and to act. In doing so, he didn't just change one young man's life. He reminded all of us that we have the power to recognize and nurture the gifts in others, no matter where we find them. Because you never know who might be sitting on a street corner playing their heart out, just waiting for someone to believe in them. The magic isn't in the celebrity or the fame. The magic is in the moment when one person decides to help another person chase their dreams. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything.